My husband asked for a divorce at my daughter's graduation party. Before I could answer, my daughter took the microphone and exposed the secret he had been hiding for a decade. Hi, everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The morning of Emma's graduation party arrived with the kind of golden light that makes you believe in second chances. I stood in our kitchen at dawn, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams streaming through the bay window, and felt something close to peace. The house smelled of vanilla and butter from the cupcakes I'd baked the night before, their frosting still soft in the refrigerator, waiting to be arranged on the tiered stand I'd borrowed from my sister. Emma was graduating summa cum laude, my baby girl, who'd struggled through calculus in 9th grade with tears streaming down her face, who'd stayed up until 3 a.m. writing essays, who'd sacrificed Friday nights and summer vacations to achieve her dreams, was finally crossing that threshold into the rest of her life. The party was my gift to her, my way of saying I saw every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt she'd conquered. I'd spent 3 months planning this celebration. The backyard had been transformed into something from a magazine spread, white string lights woven through the pergola, round tables draped in champagne linens, centerpieces of peonies and roses that cost more than I wanted to admit. I'd hired a photographer, booked a jazz quartet, ordered a custom cake with Emma's photo printed in edible ink on top, her smile frozen in that perfect moment of joy. The guest list had grown to 87 people: family, friends, Emma's teachers who'd believed in her, neighbors who'd watched her grow up, classmates who'd become like siblings. I wanted everyone who'd touched her life to witness this moment, to see the young woman she'd become. My husband, Richard, had been distant during the preparations. He'd written the checks I'd asked for without comment, his face blank as I showed him fabric swatches and menu options. When I'd asked his opinion on the seating arrangements, he'd shrugged and said whatever I thought was fine. I told myself he was stressed about work, that the merger his company was going through had him preoccupied. I'd learned over 22 years of marriage to fill in the gaps he left, to be enough enthusiasm for both of us. But there were moments, brief flashes, when I'd catch him staring at me with something I couldn't quite name in his eyes. Not anger, not quite, but something harder. Something that made my stomach clench with an anxiety I refused to acknowledge. I'd turn away, busying myself with another task, another detail that needed perfecting. The night before the party, Emma had come into my bedroom while I was steaming her dress, a beautiful cream silk sheath that made her look like a young Grace Kelly. "Mom," she'd said, her voice carrying a weight I didn't understand. "Are you happy?" I'd laughed, startled by the question. "Of course, sweetheart. Tomorrow is going to be perfect. You've worked so hard for this." "That's not what I asked." She'd stepped closer, and I could see tears gathering in her dark eyes, so much like my own. "Are you happy? In your life? In your marriage?" The steam from the dress form had risen between us like fog. I'd felt something crack inside my chest, a fissure I'd been ignoring for years. "I'm happy you're happy," I'd said, which wasn't an answer at all. Emma had opened her mouth to say something else, then closed it. She'd kissed my cheek and whispered, "I love you, Mom." More than anything. The intensity of it had surprised me, but I'd chalked it up to the emotions of graduation, the bittersweet awareness that childhood was ending. Now, as I arranged champagne flutes on the bar cart, I pushed away the memory of that strange conversation. Today was about celebration, not whatever shadows had been gathering at the edges of my marriage. I'd spent 2 decades learning to ignore those shadows, to focus on what was bright and beautiful and worth protecting. Richard came downstairs at 9, already dressed in the navy suit I'd laid out for him. He looked handsome, silver threading through his dark hair in a way that somehow made him more distinguished. I'd fallen in love with him in college, drawn to his quiet intensity, the way he seemed to have everything figured out while I was still finding my way. He'd been my anchor, my plan maker, the one who mapped out our future while I dreamed it in watercolors. "Coffee?" I asked, moving toward the machine. "I'll get it myself." His voice was clipped, professional, the tone he used with junior associates at his law firm. I watched him pour the coffee, add exactly 1 sugar and a splash of cream, the same way he'd done it for 22 years. There was something comforting in the ritual, even as the distance between us felt wider than the marble kitchen island. "The yard looks beautiful," I offered. "The rental company did an amazing job with the tent." He nodded, not turning around. "You always were good at throwing parties." It wasn't quite a compliment, but I took it as one. I'd learned to do that too, to find the love in the spaces between his words. By noon, the house was alive with activity. The caterers had arrived with warming trays and chafing dishes, filling the kitchen with the smell of garlic and rosemary. The jazz quartet was setting up in the corner of the yard, tuning their instruments in harmony that made my heart swell. The photographer was capturing details, the way the sunlight caught the crystal, the perfect curl of ribbon on the gift table. Emma came down the stairs at 1 o'clock, and I actually gasped. She was radiant in her cream dress, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon, wearing the pearl necklace my mother had given me on my wedding day. She looked like a bride, like a young woman on the precipice of everything. "Oh, baby," I whispered, tears already threatening my carefully applied mascara. "You're stunning." She hugged me tightly, and I felt her shoulders shake with what I thought was happiness. "Thank you, Mom, for all of this, for everything. You earned every bit of it." I pulled back to look at her face, memorizing this moment. "I'm so proud of you, I could burst." Richard appeared in the doorway, and something passed between him and Emma, a look I couldn't decode. She straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin in a gesture of defiance that seemed out of place in the joy of the moment. "Dad," she said, her voice steady and cool. "Emma." He nodded, professional even with his own daughter. "Congratulations." The guests began arriving at 2. They came bearing gifts and flowers and envelopes fat with cards. They exclaimed over the decorations, the food, the beautiful weather that had blessed us with 75 degrees and gentle sunshine. I floated through the crowd, accepting compliments, directing people to drinks, ensuring everyone felt welcomed and seen. My sister Caroline pulled me aside near the dessert table, her eyes scanning my face with the scrutiny only a sibling could manage. "You look tired," she said, squeezing my hand. "I've been planning this for months. Of course I'm tired." "That's not what I mean." She glanced over at Richard, who was standing alone by the bar, checking his phone. "How are things really?" I wanted to tell her about the distance, the coldness that had crept into our marriage like frost on a window. I wanted to say that I felt like I was living with a stranger, that I couldn't remember the last time Richard had touched me with genuine affection, that I woke up some nights and found him staring at the ceiling with an expression that looked like guilt. Instead, I smiled and squeezed her hand back. "Everything's perfect. Look at this day. Look at Emma." Caroline didn't look convinced, but she let it go. She knew me well enough to know when I'd built my walls too high to scale. By 4 o'clock, all 87 guests had arrived. The yard was filled with laughter and conversation, the clink of glasses and the warm notes of jazz floating over it all like a blessing. Emma held court in the center of the tent, surrounded by friends and family, glowing with the kind of joy that justified every sleepless night, every worry, every sacrifice I'd made as a mother. I stood at the edge of it all, my heart so full it ached. This was what I'd wanted, what I'd worked for. This moment of perfect happiness, this celebration of everything Emma had become. The marriage might have frost on its edges, but we'd created this beautiful human together, and that had to count for something. Richard appeared at my side, and I felt his presence before he spoke. There was a tension radiating from him, a coiled energy that made me nervous. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Not now." I kept my smile fixed, aware of the guests around us. "This is Emma's day." "I can't do this anymore." Something in his tone made me turn to face him fully. He looked pale, his jaw set in a way I recognized from courtroom photos. He was about to deliver a verdict. "Do what?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Some part of me had known for months, maybe years, and had been holding it at bay through sheer force of will. "Pretend." He met my eyes, and I saw something like relief in his face. "I can't pretend anymore." The jazz quartet finished their song. In the brief silence before the next one began, I heard my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Around us, guests laughed and chatted, oblivious to the earthquake about to split my world in two. "Richard, please, not today. We can talk tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. But please, not today." He shook his head, and I saw determination in the set of his mouth. "It has to be today. I've been waiting too long already." Before I could respond, before I could grab his arm or make some excuse to pull him away, he was walking toward the microphone stand the quartet had been using. My body went cold, ice water flooding my veins as I understood what he was about to do. "No," I whispered, but he was already there, already tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. The conversations died away gradually, guests turning to face him with curious, expectant smiles. They thought he was going to make a toast, deliver some proud fatherly speech. I saw Emma's face across the tent, her eyes wide with something that looked like horror. "Good afternoon, everyone," Richard said, his lawyer voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Emma's graduation. She's accomplished something remarkable, and she deserves this recognition." I started moving toward him, pushing through the crowd, my heels sinking into the grass. I had to stop this, whatever this was. I had to protect this day, this moment, this celebration. As you all know, my wife Sarah has spent months planning this beautiful party. He gestured toward me, and dozens of faces turned in my direction. I froze, trapped in their gazes. She's always been exceptional at creating perfect moments, at maintaining appearances. The words landed like slaps. A few people shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in tone. "But I can't maintain the appearance anymore." Richard's voice was steady, calm, like he was presenting closing arguments. "So I'm going to say this now, in front of all of you, so there's no confusion and no going back. Sarah, I want a divorce." The world tilted sideways. Someone gasped. I heard my sister say my name, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. The tent, the lights, the faces, all of it blurred together in a kaleidoscope of horror. He was divorcing me, at our daughter's graduation party, in front of 87 witnesses. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I felt like I was falling, like the ground beneath my carefully chosen heels had simply disappeared. 22 years of marriage, 23 years together, reduced to this public humiliation, this calculated cruelty. "Richard," I finally managed, my voice breaking. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." He looked at me with those hard eyes, and I saw it clearly now. Resentment, anger, and something else. Something that looked almost like hatred. "I'm done, Sarah. I'm done with this marriage, this life, all of it." The silence in the tent was absolute. Even the caterers had stopped moving, frozen with serving spoons in hand. I could feel every eye on me, could feel their pity and shock and secondhand embarrassment washing over me in waves. Emma was suddenly moving, pushing through the crowd toward the microphone. Her face was pale, but set with a determination that made her look older, harder, like she'd aged years in seconds. "Emma, don't," Richard said, but she was already there, pulling the microphone from his hands. "You want to talk about truth, Dad?" Her voice rang out clear and strong. despite the tears streaming down her face. "You want to stop pretending in front of everyone?" "Emma, this isn't the time," he started, reaching for the microphone. She yanked it away from him. "No, you made it the time. You chose to destroy Mom at my graduation party, so let's really destroy everything. Let's tell the truth you've been hiding for 10 years." I watched Richard's face drain of color. He took a step backward, shaking his head. But Emma stepped forward, following him. 10 years ago, when I was 8 years old, my father started an affair. Emma's voice didn't waver, though tears continued to stream down her face. "With his paralegal, Jennifer. I know because I found the emails when I was using his laptop for a school project." The gasps were louder now, shocked murmurs rippling through the crowd. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else, like I'd left my body and was floating somewhere above the tent, observing this nightmare from a distance. "Emma, stop!" Richard said, his voice tight with panic. "Why? You didn't stop. You didn't stop when I confronted you about it when I was 13. You didn't stop when you promised me it was over. You didn't stop when Mom was at home cooking your dinners and doing your laundry and planning this party while you were at the office with her. Jennifer, I knew Jennifer. She'd come to our house for dinner once, a pretty blonde in her 30s, with a warm smile and efficient demeanor. Richard had introduced her as his invaluable right hand at work. I'd made her my famous lasagna. She'd complimented my decorating. "That's not all, though," Emma continued, her voice rising, "because the affair was just the beginning of the lies. Dad didn't just cheat on Mom. He's been planning to leave her for years. And you know why he hasn't?" Richard was backing away now, but Emma followed him, the microphone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "Because of money. Because in our state, if you divorce before 25 years of marriage, the division of assets is different. Because if Dad had left when I was 13, Mom would have gotten more. Because if he'd left when I was 15, she would have gotten the house outright. So he waited. He stayed and made her believe they had a marriage, while he counted down the days until it was financially advantageous to destroy her life." The words kept coming, each one a hammer blow. I felt my knees buckling, felt my sister's arms suddenly around me, holding me up. "And there's more," Emma said, her voice breaking now. "Jennifer isn't just his mistress. She's the mother of his other child, a 6-year-old boy named Marcus. I found out 2 years ago when I saw them together at the park. A whole other family that Dad's been supporting, hiding, lying about for years." The tent erupted. Voices rose in shock and outrage, people turning to each other, to me, back to Richard. He stood frozen in the center of it all, his face a mask of fury and shame. I couldn't breathe. Another child, another family. 10 years of lies, 10 years of coming home to me while building a separate life with someone else. 10 years of calculating, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to discard me, like I was nothing more than a financial liability. "How could you?" The words tore out of me, raw and broken. "How could you do this?" Richard turned to me, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret flicker across his face. But then it hardened again, and he shook his head. "You want to know the truth, Sarah? Fine. I haven't been happy in 15 years. I felt trapped, suffocated by your neediness, your constant demands for attention and affection. Jennifer made me feel alive again. She understood me in ways you never did." Each word was a knife. I felt them cutting through me, filleting away the person I thought I was, the marriage I thought I had. "So you lied to me every single day for a decade?" My voice was rising, hysterical laughter bubbling up through the tears. "You let me plan this party, spend this money, stand here like an idiot while you prepared to humiliate me in front of everyone we know?" "I wanted it done," he said coldly. "I wanted witnesses so you couldn't manipulate the narrative later, couldn't pretend this was mutual or amicable. I wanted everyone to know I was choosing to leave." The cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a public execution, a calculated destruction of everything I'd built my identity around. Emma suddenly threw the microphone onto the ground. It landed with a crack and a squeal of feedback that made several people flinch. She crossed the distance between us in 3 strides and put her arms around me. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she sobbed into my shoulder. "I've known for so long and I didn't tell you. I tried to protect you, but I just made it worse. I should have told you years ago." I held my daughter while my marriage disintegrated around us. The guests were talking now, some approaching, others backing away, unsure of whether to stay or leave. I saw my sister on her phone, probably calling my mother. I saw Richard's parents standing near the bar, his mother's hand pressed to her mouth in horror. "You knew?" I pulled back to look at Emma's tear-stained face. "You've known all this time?" "Since I was 8. I saw the emails by accident, and then I couldn't stop seeing the signs. The late nights, the business trips, the way he'd smile at his phone. I confronted him when I was 13, and he begged me not to tell you. He said it would break up our family, that it would hurt you too much. He said he'd end it. But he didn't. He never did. I kept his secret because I was a kid, and I didn't know what else to do. And then I got older and realized I should have told you, but I was afraid of what it would do to you, to us. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." I looked over Emma's shoulder at Richard. He was standing with his phone pressed to his ear now, probably calling Jennifer, telling her the secret was out. His face was set in angry lines, like he was the victim in this scenario, like we'd done something terrible to him. 22 years, more than half my adult life. I'd given him my youth, my dreams, my complete trust. I'd reorganized my ambitions around his career, moved cities for his promotions, smiled through countless firm dinners and networking events. I'd made our house a home, raised our daughter, maintained the perfect image of marital success. And he'd been waiting, calculating, building an exit strategy while I picked out throw pillows and planned anniversary dinners. The rage hit me so suddenly I couldn't contain it. I pulled away from Emma and started walking toward Richard. He saw me coming and took a step back, lowering his phone. "Don't," he warned. I grabbed the nearest thing I could reach, which happened to be someone's champagne flute. Without thinking, without planning, I threw it at him. It missed, shattering against the tent pole behind him with a sound like breaking stars. 22 years! I screamed. "You stole 22 years of my life! You let me love you while you were planning how to leave me." People were moving away now, giving us space. But I didn't care. Let them see. Let them all witness what he'd done, what his carefully calculated announcement had unleashed. "You're being dramatic," Richard said, his lawyer mask firmly in place. "People fall out of love. Marriages end. I'm simply being honest about it." "Honest?" I laughed, a sound that felt like it was ripping my throat. "You've been lying for a decade. You have a whole other child. There is nothing honest about what you've done." "I provided for this family," he shot back. "You had everything you wanted. A beautiful home, financial security, social status. I fulfilled my obligations." "Your obligations?" The word tasted like poison. "I was your wife, not a job description. Emma was your daughter, not a line item on a balance sheet." Emma was suddenly beside me again, her hand gripping mine. "Come on, Mom, let's go inside, please." But I couldn't move. I stood there, staring at this man I'd loved for 23 years, trying to find some trace of the person I'd married. The boy who'd brought me coffee during late-night study sessions, who'd cried when Emma was born, who'd promised to love me forever in front of family and friends, and God. He was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. Maybe I'd been in love with a carefully constructed illusion, a performance he'd maintained just long enough to suit his purposes. "I want you out of the house tonight," I heard myself say. "Take whatever you need and get out." "That's not how this works," Richard said calmly. "The house is jointly owned. I have every right to stay there." "After what you just did? After humiliating me in front of everyone? You think I'm going to let you sleep under the same roof?" "What I think," he said, pocketing his phone, "is that you should get a good lawyer. Because I plan to fight for every cent I'm entitled to." The words hung in the air between us, a final confirmation of how thoroughly he destroyed us. This wasn't about love or family or trying to work things out. This was a business transaction to him, a calculated division of assets. I felt something inside me shatter, some final piece of hope or delusion. I'd spent months planning this party to celebrate Emma, to create a perfect memory of this milestone moment. Instead, Richard had turned it into the public execution of our marriage, a spectacle of betrayal and cruelty that would echo through our family for generations. The guests were leaving now, gathering purses and jackets, offering hurried condolences and awkward hugs. The caterers were packing up half-eaten food. The jazz quartet had already disappeared, their instruments and music stands vanishing like they'd never been. My sister stayed, of course, and my mother arrived within 20 minutes, her face set in the grim determination that had gotten our family through my father's death and her own breast cancer diagnosis. Richard's parents approached him, their faces mapped with disappointment and anger. I watched his mother say something to him in a low, harsh voice, saw him flinch like she'd slapped him. Good. I hoped his own mother told him what a coward he was. I hoped everyone who'd witnessed this told him exactly what they thought of a man who'd destroy his family at his daughter's graduation party. Emma never left my side. She stood with me as the tent emptied, as the perfect party I'd planned dissolved into whispered gossip and shocked departures. She held my hand while I signed the paperwork for the rental company, her presence the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. As the last guest left, as the sun began to set over the ruins of my marriage, Emma turned to me with tears still streaming down her face. "I should have told you," she whispered. "Years ago, I should have told you the truth." I cupped her face in my hands, this beautiful young woman who'd carried such a terrible secret for so much of her childhood. "You were protecting me. You were being my daughter. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. But I knew he was lying to you every single day, and I let him. You were a child. He's the adult who made these choices. He's the one who betrayed us both." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her sob against my shoulder. "You're the bravest person I know. What you did today, telling the truth, standing up for both of us, that took incredible courage." "I couldn't let him do it," Emma said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I couldn't let him stand there and make you look like the bad guy, like any of this was your fault. I couldn't let him rewrite history." We stood there in the empty tent, surrounded by abandoned centerpieces and half-full champagne glasses, and I realized something fundamental had shifted. My marriage was over, yes. My life as I'd known it was destroyed. But Emma and I were still standing. We were still together. Richard appeared at the edge of the tent, a duffel bag in his hand. He'd gone into the house at some point and packed some belongings. I watched him with a strange detachment, like he was a character in a movie rather than my husband of 22 years. "I'll be staying at a hotel tonight," he said stiffly. "My lawyer will be in touch about the proceedings." "There's a 6-year-old boy," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Jennifer's child, your child. Does he know about Emma? Does he know about me?" Richard's jaw tightened. "That's complicated." "I bet it is." I felt Emma's hand squeeze mine. "Did you ever love me, Richard? At any point in the last 23 years, did you actually love me?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Regret, maybe, or nostalgia for a version of himself that hadn't made these choices. "I thought I did," he said finally. "In the beginning. But somewhere along the way, I realized we wanted different things. I wanted more than suburban domesticity and PTA meetings. I wanted passion, excitement, a life that felt alive." "So you found it with Jennifer?" "Yes." The simple admission was somehow worse than all the rest of it. No justification, no attempt to soften the blow. Just yes, he'd found what he wanted with someone else and decided I was expendable. "I hope she's worth it," I said quietly. I hope your 6-year-old son and your secret life are worth destroying your daughter's graduation, your marriage, and any respect anyone in this community had for you. People will understand, Richard said. These things happen. Not like this, they don't. Emma's voice was steel. You could have done this quietly, privately. You could have had a shred of dignity. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to humiliate Mom in the most public way possible because it gave you some kind of satisfaction. I'm not going to be lectured by a teenager, Richard said, his voice rising. I'm not a teenager. I'm 18 years old, and I'm old enough to see exactly what you are. You're a coward who couldn't face the consequences of your actions, so you tried to control the narrative by making a spectacle. But all you did was show everyone who you really are. Richard's face flushed with anger. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to argue, to defend himself. Instead, he just shook his head and walked toward his car. We watched him drive away, his headlights cutting through the dusk. The sound of his engine faded into the distance, and then there was just silence and the ruins of a party that was supposed to be perfect. My mother appeared with 2 glasses of wine, pressing one into my hand and the other into Emma's. My sister was directing the rental company workers, efficiently coordinating the teardown of a celebration that had ended in catastrophe. He's an asshole, my mother said bluntly, raising her glass. Always was, if I'm honest. Too much like your father in the early days, all charm and promises with nothing underneath. I took a long drink of wine, feeling it burn down my throat. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would you have listened? She gave me a knowing look. You loved him. You were building a life. What was I supposed to say? Your husband might be a narcissistic bastard, but I hope I'm wrong. Emma laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. Grandma, you're terrible. I'm honest. My mother put her arm around Emma's shoulders. Which is more than we can say for your father. That was a brave thing you did today, baby girl. Terrifying and brave. I've been carrying his secret for 10 years, Emma said, fresh tears spilling over. It felt like poison. Every time Mom would smile at him, every time she'd talk about their anniversary or plan something special, I wanted to scream, but I was so afraid of what it would do to her, to all of us. Secrets like that, my mother said quietly, they eat you alive from the inside. You did the right thing bringing it into the light. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was still in her beautiful cream dress, her hair starting to come loose from its elegant updo. She should have been radiant with graduation joy, flushed with champagne and compliments, and the promise of her future. Instead, she looked exhausted and heartbroken, bearing the weight of truths she should never have had to carry. I'm sorry, I said, pulling her into my arms again. I'm so sorry you had to deal with any of this. You should have been able to just be a kid, just be my daughter, without being caught in the middle of your father's lies. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. None of this is your fault. But wasn't it, in some way? Hadn't I chosen to ignore the signs, to smooth over the cracks, to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage, even when the foundation was crumbling? How many nights had I made excuses for his late arrivals, his distraction, his emotional distance? How many times had I convinced myself that this was just how marriages evolved, that passion naturally cooled into companionship? I'd been complicit in my own deception, choosing comfort over truth. The rental company finished packing up the last of the tables and chairs. My sister came over with her purse and car keys, her face set in the familiar expression she got when she was in crisis management mode. I've got the guest room made up, she said. Both of you are staying with me tonight. No arguments. Caroline, I can't just leave my house. Yes, you can. You're not staying there tonight, not with all of this hanging over it. You need space, time to think, people around you who actually love you. She looked at Emma. Both of you need that. My mother nodded. She's right. Come home with us. We'll figure out next steps in the morning, but tonight, you both need to be somewhere safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. I'd thought I was safe in my marriage, in my beautiful home, in the life I'd built. But it had all been an elaborate stage set, carefully constructed to hide the truth. There was no safety in illusion. We drove to Caroline's house in silence, Emma's hand in mine the entire way. My sister lived in a Victorian downtown, all hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves and windows that let in too much light. Usually, I found it charming. Tonight, it felt like a refuge. Caroline put Emma in the guest room and led me to her own bedroom. "You're taking my bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "Caroline, I can't." "You can and you will. I'm going to make you tea, and you're going to drink it, and then you're going to sleep, or at least try to." She disappeared downstairs, and I sank onto her bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, every muscle aching with the effort of holding myself together. The door opened quietly, and Emma slipped in, still in her graduation dress. She climbed onto the bed beside me and curled into my side the way she used to when she was small and had nightmares. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it's going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to find some kernel of hope in the wreckage of this day, but all I could feel was the weight of 22 years of memories being rewritten, reconsidered, tainted by the truth of Richard's betrayal. Had any of it been real? The wedding? The honeymoon in Italy? The day Emma was born? The vacations and holidays and ordinary Tuesday nights watching television on the couch? Or had it all been contaminated by his lies, by the separate life he'd been building in the shadows? "Mom," Emma said softly, "I need to tell you something else." My body tensed. I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. The reason I went to the park that day and saw Dad with Jennifer and Marcus, I was following him. I'd started to suspect something was still going on, so I tracked his location on his phone and followed him there. "Emma, I know it was wrong, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand what I was protecting you from, whether the secret was worse than the truth." She pulled back to look at me. "I've been keeping folders of evidence for 2 years. Emails, text messages, photos, financial records. Everything I could find about the affair, about Marcus, about Dad's plans to divorce you at the 25-year mark to preserve his financial interests." I stared at her, stunned. "You've been building a case against your own father?" "I've been protecting you," she corrected. "I knew that when the truth finally came out, you'd need proof. I knew Dad would try to make himself look like the victim, try to rewrite history to justify what he did, so I made sure you'd have evidence." My 18-year-old daughter had spent 2 years of her adolescence gathering evidence of her father's betrayal. While her friends were worrying about prom and college applications, she'd been downloading emails and tracking expenses, building a legal case to protect me. "That's too much," I whispered. "Baby, that's too much for anyone to carry, let alone a child." "I'm not a child anymore." Emma's voice was firm. "And I'm not sorry I did it. You're going to need everything I collected when the divorce proceedings start. Dad has access to expensive lawyers and unlimited resources. You need ammunition." Caroline appeared in the doorway with tea, taking in the scene. Emma and me curled together on the bed, tears streaming down both our faces. She set the mugs on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. What did I miss? "Emma's been building a case against Richard for 2 years, I said, my voice hollow. "Evidence of the affair, the child, his financial planning." Caroline's eyebrows shot up. "Jesus, you're a better detective than half the lawyers I know." She looked at Emma with something like awe. "That's incredibly smart, kiddo, and probably just saved your mom from getting destroyed in court." "I couldn't let him win," Emma said simply. "Not after everything he's done." We sat there together, the 3 of us, while the reality of the situation slowly crystallized. This wasn't just a marriage ending. This was a war beginning. Richard had the resources, the connections, the ruthless determination of someone who'd been planning his exit strategy for a decade. But we had something he didn't. The truth, documented and preserved. waiting to be used. My mother joined us eventually, bringing sandwiches no one ate and a bottle of bourbon that we all sipped from, even Emma. We talked late into the night, processing, planning, grieving. Caroline called her lawyer friend, who promised to meet with me first thing Monday morning. My mother called our financial advisor, who expressed shock and promised to review all our joint accounts immediately. Around midnight, Emma finally fell asleep, her head on my shoulder. I stroked her hair, this warrior daughter who'd sacrificed so much of her adolescence to protect me, and felt something shift inside my chest. The pain was still there, raw and overwhelming. The betrayal still burned like acid, but underneath it, I felt something else emerging, a fierce determination to survive this, to rebuild, to become someone who didn't need the illusion of a perfect marriage to feel whole. "You're going to be okay," Caroline whispered, reading my thoughts the way only sisters can. "It's going to hurt like hell for a while, but you're going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because I know you. You're stronger than you think you are. You've just been letting Richard's needs and wants define your strength for so long that you forgot what you're capable of." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I couldn't. She was right. I'd spent 22 years molding myself around Richard's expectations, his ambitions, his version of what our life should be. I'd become so good at supporting his dreams that I'd forgotten I'd ever had my own. "I used to want to be an architect," I said suddenly. "Before Emma, before marriage, I wanted to design buildings, beautiful, functional spaces that made people feel something." "I remember," my mother said softly. "You had your whole portfolio ready for graduate school applications." Richard convinced me to put it on hold. He said we needed to focus on his career first, that there would be time for my ambitions later. I laughed bitterly. Later never came. "Maybe it's coming now," Caroline said. "Maybe this is the beginning of later." The idea felt absurd in the midst of so much pain, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of something like hope flickered to life. I was 44 years old. My marriage was ending in spectacular fashion. My daughter had just graduated and would be leaving for college in 3 months. My entire life was being dismantled. And maybe, just maybe, that meant I could rebuild it into something real this time. Something that wasn't constructed around someone else's lies and limitations. We finally went to sleep around 2 in the morning, Emma still curled beside me in Caroline's guest bed. I lay awake long after everyone else had drifted off, staring at the ceiling and replaying the day in my mind. The beautiful decorations, the perfect food, the moment when Richard had taken the microphone and detonated our lives. I thought about Jennifer, the woman I'd made lasagna for, who'd been sleeping with my husband and raising his child while I played the dutiful wife. I wondered if she knew about today, if Richard had called her from his hotel room and told her the secret was finally out. I wondered if she felt guilty or vindicated, if she'd been pushing him to leave me, or if she'd been content with the arrangement as it was. I thought about Marcus, a 6-year-old boy who existed because of my husband's betrayal. An innocent child who'd done nothing wrong, but would forever be a living reminder of the lies that had destroyed my marriage. Did he look like Richard? Did he have Emma's dark eyes? Would he grow up knowing he had a half-sister, or would Richard keep them separate, protecting his separate lives, even in divorce? And I thought about Emma, my brave, brilliant daughter, who'd carried such a terrible burden for so much of her childhood. She should have been worrying about homework and friendships and high school drama, not tracking her father's affair and gathering evidence of financial manipulation. The guilt of that threatened to swallow me whole. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, I finally drifted into a restless sleep filled with dreams of parties that never ended and houses that had too many rooms, secret spaces I'd never known existed. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Emma was gone from the bed, and for a moment I panicked before I heard her voice in the kitchen, talking to Caroline. My body felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Every muscle ached, my head throbbed, and my eyes were swollen from crying. I caught my reflection in Caroline's dresser mirror and barely recognized myself. Hair tangled, mascara smudged, still wearing yesterday's dress that was now wrinkled and stained with champagne. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman whose life had imploded. Downstairs, I found my family gathered around Caroline's kitchen table. My mother was making eggs, Caroline was on her laptop researching divorce attorneys, and Emma was scrolling through her phone, her face set in grim determination. "Mom," she said when she saw me, "it's already everywhere. The video." My stomach dropped. "What video?" She turned her phone around, and I saw footage of the party, shaky and poorly lit, but unmistakable. Someone had filmed Richard's announcement, Emma's revelation, the entire catastrophic scene, and they'd posted it online. "It's gone viral," Emma said quietly. 4 million views in 12 hours. Everyone's talking about it. I sank into a chair, watching the video play out again in miniature. There was Richard, calm and cold, asking for a divorce. There was me, frozen in shock. And there was Emma, magnificent in her fury, exposing every lie. The comments section was filled with thousands of people weighing in. Support for Emma, condemnation of Richard, speculation about Jennifer and Marcus. Our private disaster had become public entertainment, dissected and discussed by strangers around the world. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Emma whispered. "I should have grabbed someone's phone. Should have stopped them from recording. It's not your fault." My voice sounded distant, mechanical. "None of this is your fault." But even as I said it, I felt a strange sense of relief. Richard had wanted witnesses to his announcement, had wanted to control the narrative. But the video showed the truth. A cruel man destroying his family for his own convenience, and a brave daughter standing up to protect her mother. The court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict, and it wasn't in Richard's favor. Caroline's phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. She answered, listened for a moment, then looked at me with wide eyes. "That was my lawyer friend, Diane. She wants to meet with you today instead of Monday. Apparently, Richard's firm is already doing damage control, and she thinks you need representation immediately." Everything was moving so fast. Less than 24 hours ago, I'd been setting out champagne glasses and arranging flowers. Now I was preparing for legal warfare, my marriage's destruction playing out on millions of screens around the world. We met with Diane at her office that afternoon. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation on winning brutal divorce cases. She listened to everything Emma had collected, watched the viral video 3 times, and made notes in a leather-bound journal. "This is good," she said finally. "Very good. The evidence of premeditation, the financial manipulation, the affair, the secret child, all of it strengthens your position considerably. And the video, as terrible as it must be for you personally, actually works in your favor. He comes across as calculating and cruel. Any judge who sees it will take that into consideration." "What about Marcus?" I asked. "Richard's other son?" "What about him?" "Will he be part of the divorce proceedings? Will I have to? Will there be custody considerations or—" "Marcus isn't your child or your responsibility," Diane said firmly. "Richard's obligations to him are separate from your divorce. You won't have any legal connection to Jennifer's child." The relief I felt was immediately followed by guilt. Marcus was innocent in all of this, a child who'd done nothing wrong. But I couldn't be his stepmother, couldn't be responsible for the product of my husband's betrayal. The very thought made me feel sick. "I want the house," I said suddenly, "and I want fair compensation for the 22 years I spent supporting his career while sacrificing my own. I want him to pay for what he did." Diane smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me of a shark. "Then let's make sure that's exactly what happens." The next weeks were a blur of legal meetings, document signing, and media attention I never wanted. The video continued to spread, spawning think pieces about infidelity, articles about financial abuse in marriage, and countless social media debates. I became a reluctant symbol of betrayed wives everywhere, receiving messages of support from strangers who'd lived through similar devastation. Richard's law firm put him on administrative leave, unable to ignore the PR nightmare he'd created. His parents called me, apologizing for their son, offering their support in whatever way I needed. His mother cried on the phone, saying she'd raised him better than this, that she was ashamed of what he'd done. Jennifer's name and photo were leaked online, leading to her own public reckoning. She lost her job at Richard's firm, her social media accounts flooded with hate from strangers. Part of me felt guilty about that too. She'd made terrible choices, yes, but she was also a single mother who'd been in a relationship with a man who'd lied to her just as thoroughly as he'd lied to me. Richard had probably told her our marriage was dead, that he was staying for financial reasons, that he'd leave me as soon as it was feasible. We were both his victims, in different ways. Emma deferred her college enrollment by a semester, insisting she needed to stay home and make sure I was okay. I tried to argue, tried to convince her that her life shouldn't be put on hold because of her father's choices, but she was immovable. "I'm not leaving you alone right now," she said firmly. "College will still be there in January. You need me, and I need to know you're okay." So we settled into a new routine in Caroline's guest room, then eventually in the apartment I rented downtown. Smaller and simpler than the house, but entirely mine. No memories of Richard in the walls, no ghosts of our failed marriage haunting the hallways. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Richard fought for everything, his lawyer painting me as a bitter, vindictive wife trying to destroy a good man. But Diane was better. She presented Emma's evidence methodically, building a picture of a man who'd systematically deceived his family for a decade, who'd planned his exit strategy with the cold calculation of a corporate merger. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, who'd seen every type of divorce case imaginable, was not sympathetic to Richard's position. When his lawyer tried to argue that the affair was a symptom of marital unhappiness rather than the cause, she shut him down with a look that could freeze fire. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice cutting through the courtroom, "you maintained a decade-long affair, fathered a child outside your marriage, and strategically planned your divorce to minimize financial impact on yourself while maximizing damage to your wife. The evidence is overwhelming and documented. I suggest you stop wasting this court's time with justifications and start negotiating a settlement that reflects your behavior." Richard's face went white. His lawyer asked for a recess. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Diane squeezed my hand. "That went very well. The judge is on our side. They'll come back with a better offer, I promise you." She was right. 2 days later, Richard's lawyer proposed a settlement that gave me the house, a substantial portion of his retirement accounts, and enough alimony to ensure I'd never have to worry about money while I figured out my next steps. "Take it," Diane advised. "You could probably get more if we go to trial, but this is fair, and it ends things faster. Sometimes closure is worth more than another few $1,000s. I signed the papers in Diane's office, Emma beside me for moral support. My hand shook as I wrote my name, finalizing the end of 22 years of marriage. But underneath the sadness and the grief, I felt something else. Freedom. Emma drove us home from the lawyer's office, taking the long way along the river so I could watch the water and breathe. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed almost too beautiful for such a day. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly. "Like I just survived something terrible," I said honestly, "but also like I might actually be okay eventually." "You will be, better than okay." She glanced at me, her dark eyes so serious. "You know what I realized, watching you these past few months?" "What?" "You're the strongest person I know. You went through something that would have destroyed most people, and you didn't just survive it, you fought back. You stood up for yourself. You didn't let Dad rewrite the narrative or make you the villain." "I had help," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I had you. We had each other." She smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. That's what families do, right? The real ones. They stand together when everything falls apart. We drove home in comfortable silence, and I thought about what came next. The house was mine now, empty of Richard's presence, but full of memories I'd have to decide what to do with. Emma would start college in January, beginning her own life, her own journey. And I would be here, 44 years old and single for the first time in over 2 decades. The prospect should have terrified me. Instead, I felt curious about it, cautiously optimistic about the space opening up in my life. That night, I pulled out the old portfolio from college, the one I'd packed away when Richard convinced me to postpone graduate school. The designs were dated, the drawings amateur, but I could see the passion in them, the hope of a younger version of myself who'd believed she could create something beautiful and meaningful. "What's that?" Emma asked, appearing in my doorway with tea. "Old dreams," I said, smiling at her. "I was thinking maybe it's time to dust them off, see if there's anything worth salvaging." She sat beside me, looking through the drawings. "These are amazing, Mom. You should have been an architect." "Maybe I still can be." The words felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. There are graduate programs for mature students. I could go back to school, finish what I started. "You absolutely should." Emma's face lit up with excitement. "Imagine, we could be in college at the same time. I'll be getting my undergrad while you're getting your master's. How cool would that be?" It would be cool. It would be terrifying and challenging and completely different from anything I'd planned for my life. But then again, none of this had been part of the plan. The plan had involved growing old with Richard, supporting his career, being the perfect wife and mother and hostess. That plan had been built on lies. Maybe it was time to build something real instead. Over the following months, life slowly began to reshape itself into something I could recognize as mine. I applied to graduate programs in architecture, my old professors writing recommendation letters that made me cry with their faith in my potential. I sold some of the furniture from the house that was too big for my apartment, keeping only the pieces that meant something beyond their function. The reading chair where I'd nursed Emma as a baby, the kitchen table where she'd done her homework, the bookshelf I'd built myself in a fit of DIY enthusiasm. Emma helped me paint the apartment, choosing colors that were bold and vibrant instead of the neutral tones Richard had always insisted on. We hung art on the walls, photographs of the two of us at different ages, frozen moments of joy and love that had been real even when the marriage wasn't. The viral video eventually faded from public consciousness, replaced by new scandals and dramas. But I still occasionally received messages from women who'd seen it, who'd found the courage to leave their own bad marriages because of Emma's bravery or my survival. Those messages meant more than they probably should have. Small reminders that our pain had served some purpose beyond our own devastation. Richard moved in with Jennifer officially, the three of them playing house like they'd always been a family. Emma refused to see him at first, too angry and hurt by his choices. But eventually, slowly, she agreed to supervised visits, more for her own healing than for his benefit. She'd never forgive him completely. Some betrayals cut too deep for that, but she was learning to accept that he was flawed and human, and still, despite everything, her father. I never saw Marcus. That felt right, a boundary that protected us both from the awkwardness of our connection. Emma mentioned him occasionally. He was in first grade. He liked dinosaurs. He had Richard's stubborn chin. She'd met him a few times during her visits with Richard, and she reported that he was sweet and shy and completely innocent of the circumstances of his birth. "He asked if I was his real sister," Emma told me after one visit. I said yes. Because I am, right? Even though I hate how he came to exist, he's still my brother. "He is," I agreed. "And that's big of you, to separate him from the circumstances. He deserves a relationship with you, if you want that." "I think I do, eventually, when it doesn't hurt so much." A year after the graduation party that had destroyed my marriage, Emma left for college. We loaded her belongings into my new used car, smaller than the SUV I'd driven as Richard's wife, but entirely mine, and made the 3-hour drive to her university. She'd chosen a school far enough away to feel independent, but close enough to come home on weekends if she needed to. I helped her move into her dorm room, meeting her roommate and her roommate's parents, who were going through their own divorce drama. We traded knowing looks, members of the same reluctant club. "Are you going to be okay?" Emma asked as I prepared to leave. "Alone in the apartment?" "I'm going to be fine," I assured her, and I meant it. "I'm starting graduate school next week. I've got projects to work on, a life to build. You go be 18 and brilliant, and don't worry about your old mother." "You're not old." She hugged me tightly. "And I'm always going to worry about you. That's what we do." "Then worry from a distance while you're out discovering who you want to be," I said, kissing her forehead. "You've spent too much of your childhood taking care of me. It's time for you to take care of yourself." I cried the entire drive home, the complicated tears of a mother watching her child leave and a woman stepping into an uncertain future. But by the time I reached the apartment, the tears had stopped, replaced by a strange, buoyant feeling that I eventually recognized as anticipation. Graduate school started the following week, and I found myself the oldest student in most of my classes by decades. The younger students looked at me with curiosity at first, then respect as they realized I could keep up, that age hadn't diminished my ability to learn and create and push myself. I made friends with a professor, a woman named Diana, who'd also divorced late in life and rebuilt her career from scratch. We got coffee after class, sharing stories of survival and reinvention. She introduced me to other women who'd started over, who'd taken their pain and transformed it into purpose. Slowly, carefully, I started to build a life that looked nothing like the one I'd imagined, but felt more authentically mine than anything I'd had before. I designed buildings on my laptop late at night, structures that were bold and innovative and completely impractical. I took long walks by the river, thinking about nothing and everything. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years, cooked meals just for myself, stayed up late, or slept in late without having to consider anyone else's schedule. And sometimes, late at night, I thought about Richard and the life we'd had. I tried to find the truth in the memories, to separate what had been real from what had been performance. Some memories survived the scrutiny: Emma's birth, certain holidays, quiet moments that had felt genuine at the time. Others crumbled under examination, revealing themselves as elaborate theater, scenes in a play I hadn't realized I was performing in. I forgave him, eventually. Not because he deserved it. He'd never apologized, never acknowledged the full depth of his betrayal. But because holding on to the anger was exhausting. It took up space in my heart that I wanted for other things: joy, creativity, hope for the future. So I let it go, piece by piece, until all that remained was a faint sadness for the years we'd wasted, and a deep gratitude that I'd gotten out before wasting any more. 2 years after the divorce, I graduated with my master's degree in architecture. Emma came home for the ceremony, proud and beaming, and I realized we'd switched roles. She was taking care of me the way I'd once taken care of her, celebrating my achievements with the same fierce love I'd always given hers. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she said, hugging me tightly after I received my diploma. "Look at everything you've done. Look at who you've become." I looked around at my new life, the small but elegant apartment, the portfolio of designs I'd created, the friendships I'd built, the daughter who'd stood beside me through everything. It wasn't what I'd planned. It wasn't the happily ever after I'd imagined when I married Richard all those years ago. It was better. It was real. It was mine. That night, Emma and I sat on my apartment balcony, sharing a bottle of champagne and watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. She was 20 now, confident and self-assured in ways I'd never been at her age. The weight she'd carried for so long had finally lifted, leaving her lighter, freer. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't told the truth at the party?" she asked. "If I'd just let Dad make his announcement and kept his secrets?" Sometimes," I admitted. But I think we would have ended up here eventually. Maybe not the same way, but the truth has a way of coming out. I don't regret it, Emma said firmly. Exposing him, I mean. I know it was horrible and public and painful, but at least it was honest. At least everyone saw who he really was. No regrets from me either. I clinked my glass against hers. That party was supposed to be about you graduating, about celebrating your achievements. And in a weird way, it still was. You graduated from childhood that day, Emma. You became someone strong enough to stand up to her father, brave enough to tell a terrible truth. That's worth celebrating. We sat in comfortable silence, sipping champagne and watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere across the city, Richard was living his life with Jennifer and Marcus, building the family he'd wanted more than the one he'd had. Somewhere, other people were going through their own betrayals and transformations, their own painful evolutions into whoever they were meant to become. And here, on this balcony, my daughter and I sat together, survivors of our own story, architects of our own futures. The graduation party had been 3 years ago, but in many ways, it felt like a lifetime. The woman I'd been that morning, arranging cupcakes and believing in the illusion of her perfect marriage, was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, more authentically herself. It had taken humiliation and heartbreak to get here. It had taken my daughter's courage and my own stubborn refusal to be destroyed by someone else's lies. But I'd made it. We'd made it. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her glass. To truth, I countered. To us, she finished, and we drank to that, to the family we'd always been underneath the facade, to the women we were becoming. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of jasmine from someone's garden below. Music drifted up from a party somewhere nearby, the sound of people celebrating whatever milestones their lives had brought them to. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and continue building my career, taking on my first real clients for the architectural firm that had hired me part-time. Emma would drive back to college, to her own life and dreams and future. But tonight, we had this moment, this space, this peace we'd fought so hard to claim. And it was more than enough.